and having those relationships in place can really take a bad situation and deal with it in as best a way that you can. And that's what we're trying to deal with, overall with the supply chain. We've just had that economic dislocation from the pandemic. It has essentially exposed a great deal of little small fractures in our supply chain globally, and it's impacting our economy. It's impacting some of the businesses that are here today that are going to be speaking, and we certainly want to take as many opportunities as we can to try to recommend policy, recommend process, and work across government and private sector, federal, state, and local to essentially figure out how we can continue to deal with the growth in the movement of freight, the expansion of the economy, and the ability for not only citizens but our companies to thrive here in Missouri and to take advantage of some of the things that are going on. So I'm pleased that we're here. Dr. Leathers, welcome. And we've got Mary Lamy is here. Dustin, thanks for being online. We've got Chris Gutierrez will be joining us online as well, and Caitlin Murphy as well. And so we're just going to get started. We'll get started with a safety minute by Mark Corkin from our Southeast District. Mark.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome everybody to the Southeast MoDOT District Office. I thought I'd just take a brief moment. Linda Wilson-Horn in the corner and myself have agreed that if there are any health emergencies, that we'll take care of calling 911 and make sure we find someone for CPR. There is a first aid kit right across the hall. The building is equipped with an AED that's kind of through the vending machine area, probably through the lobby from where you came in. In the case of a fire, we can all do our best to go out the front where we came and regroup outside in the parking lot. Try to look for the people around you to make sure they make it out safe too. If for some reason we couldn't head out through the lobby, there is a door straight across this way that goes to a loading dock, and that would be the back way out. It would be very similar if we had an earthquake. We would pretty well do the same drill, only you have to hold on first and kind of duck under the table until you can get your bearings back, and then we would regroup outside again. In the unlikely event, I hate to even bring it up, that there was an active shooter. Those are things we talk about now because society's changed a little bit. This building does have a few emergency buttons that I would be fairly confident someone would alert the police. Local construction, we've tested those out recently. It's about 4.5 minutes that it would take for police to get here. So that would be the time that we have to decide if we're going to hide or we're going to run or we're going to fight back. So I feel pretty good about that, but if we heard shots in the other end of the building, I'd probably again go out the loading dock. So if you need anything while you're here, just let Linda or I know, and we'll take care of it. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Just wanted to open it up to my task force committee members for any opening comments that you may have before we head right into the presentations. I'll start. Dustin, I see you on there, and I'll try to do a better job than I've done in the last meetings. If you raise your hand online, I'll try to remember to look over at the board every once in a while. So, and if anyone would give me a nudge or just recognize them, I see Caitlin's on there as well. So, Dustin, Caitlin, any opening remarks as we get going? Nope. Great.
Thank you. I'm good.
Nope, I'm good as well.
Director McKenna and the Governor's Office for the invitation to come down to MoDOT's facility in Sykeston, Missouri, and looking forward to the presentations we're about to hear.
Great. Thanks, Mary.
I just want to say it's great to be back at Southeast Missouri as well. It's my old stomping grounds as a Cmo grad, so I always love an excuse to come to Cmo. And so excited to hear the conversation today. One thing I will say about these meetings is every time we have one, I learn a lot more than I thought I even would learn. And so it's just amazing the interconnection between workforce development, economic development, and certainly transportation. So it's a great thing. One quick thing, last week I was in Washington, D.C. We had our National Governors Association meeting. I'm the vice chair of our state directors group, and 90% of our conversation was about the bipartisan infrastructure plan and how we're working together to try to figure out, workforce development's role in supporting this. So I just want to know that Missouri, let you guys know, the work that this task force is doing is getting national attention, and there's some states watching what might come out of this to see what they might do next. So kudos on your great work.
Great, thanks, Dr. Leathers. Yeah, one of the things also, we always want to keep it open for any task force members of the public to suggest any topics that they'd like for us to consider as we're studying this topic. We're gathering all of the presentations that we've received thus far. They'll all be, we're loading those on our website, and those will all be available as part of the final report. We'll make them as appendices so that they'll, the full and complete record of feedback that we've received will happen. And also want to just encourage anybody that's listening or has an issue or an item that they'd like to bring before the task force, think that maybe there are some areas that we need to look at that we haven't considered yet. I continue to get emails and that during the weeks. We'll add those in as potential discussion topics or even for something to be added into the final report. So we're starting in that drafting process of the report itself. We were given a tall task in a limited time frame. So we're trying to move that forward. And we're in the next, in the next several weeks, we're going to have some of the draft sections that we'll be working with the task force to go through, modify, revise. We'll make those, we'll kind of work through that process with the task force. There is going to be a public comment period. So when we get the draft report done, we'll put it out for public comment, and we'll certainly consider any comments that we get. So unless there's any other matters, love to jump right in. We've got I see Mandy is here, Mandy Brink, who's our Cmo Port Director and just a terrific partner in transportation here locally. Mandy's going to talk about waterborne freight transportation, and again, has done a terrific job, wears many hats, including working with the Port Association. Has been a really terrific leader in coordinating the efforts. Really unique. I think people don't realize, you have a combination of public and private sector kind of working together, but also there's a coordination effort that goes on with limited resources that are available at the state level for investment in our public ports. The coordination that the ports do, they literally will look at each other's capital improvement projects and work together to find, with limited resources, the highest priorities and try to share those resources so that the whole state port system gets strengthened each year, even, again, with limited resources. So want to thank Mandy for being here, and I'll open up the floor to you, Mandy. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Mandy Brink. I am the Assistant Director at Cmo Port, and then I'm also the President of the Port Authority Association, which is also known as MPAA. I would have liked to had you guys at the office today to do a tour, but since you weren't able to make it to the port, we thought we would just give a brief overview of Cmo Port, just to outline one of the many ports that we have across the state. Again, we are one of 16 public ports in the state of Missouri. We are one of 5 in southeast Missouri. We're located just outside of Scott City. Our port was founded in 1975 by both Cape Girardeau and Scott counties. A cornerstone of our development was the passage of a 1/4-cent sales tax that both counties approved in 85 by 70% to the voters. So no other port in the state has ever used a sales tax. They have that ability, but nobody else has ever used that. It began in 86 and it sunset in 90, and that provided $7.3 million of owner's equity to serve as match to some of our grants that we had at the very beginning of the port's development. A couple of those projects was we built our 1,800-foot slackwater harbor, which was built by the Corps and was opened in 1990. Our cargo dock that is operated by a public operator, it was also completed in 1990, and that money from the sales tax helped pay for that. Cmo Port develops and leases land to river-related industries and terminals. Several terminal companies provide freight transfer between barge, truck, and rail, And the port has tracks available for both public rail to truck transfer of freight as well as the private companies. Again, part of that sales tax that we had, part of that money went to purchase a short line, 6 miles, and we purchased it from the Union Pacific in 1994. That short line branch is now known as Cmo Port Railroad. We do operate that railroad. The services of actually doing the switching was contracted out to a private operator. We connect to both the Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern, which gives our customers a little bit of a competitive advantage because you're going to be able to reach more places. It also gives them a competitive advantage too because they can kind of, I'm looking at Nestle Purina because they utilize us as well. So they can go to both places. Most people think that Cmo Port only serves Cape Girardeau and Scott County. Nobody realizes that our impact is actually not just regional, but it is like Southeast Missouri. It's not just Southeast Missouri. It goes all the way across the state. I did hand out our brochure because, again, I know you guys couldn't make it, so I wanted to make sure that you had our brochure. But if you were to open your brochure up and you were to look there on the left-hand side, there is a packet that is stapled, and I apologize, I should have pulled this out first. This is going to give you an idea of where our outreach is. These maps show where tonnage has come in or come out of Cmo Port. So this one is Southeast Missouri, Missouri and Southern Illinois. I will say they're almost 10 years outdated, so just keep that in mind. So we have an impact, obviously, in Missouri and Southern Illinois, but if you look across the United States on page 2, you see where we've reached. And then the last page is the world map. This tonnage that on the world map includes everything except our grain tonnage. And the reason behind that is our grain tonnage leaves Cmo Port and it goes to the ports, San Louisiana, and that elevator mixes our grain in with other grains, and we just don't know where it goes from there. So we know it goes other places, but without being stingy and greedy and covering all the world, we just make that disclaimer that we know it goes somewhere, but we don't know exactly where it goes. In the past 5 to 10 years, we've had some interest in moving cargo via unit train. The track that we have at the port right now, we could hold a unit train, but there's just not enough room for all the cars to be hooked together, unloaded at one time. And then you have to do brake tests, so it adds on time. So at the time, about 2017, we decided that we needed to look at looking at funding this loop track terminal. Building a loop track terminal, it provides that capability of efficient multimodal transfer of multiple products between rail and barge. And our terminal is the only public terminal between Memphis and St. Louis. And again, it is served by 2 Class I railroads. The terminal itself is going to have about 12,000 track feet. One of the tracks will be used as a dump track, and the other one will be a storage track or a runaround track. We have plans for 4 additional tracks to go inside the loop, as well as a crane track for containers or lift-on, lift-off cargo, a ramp for drive-on, drive-off vehicles. I know the National Guard has used us to maneuver some of their machinery in the past, so we want to make sure we have that capability. We know that this terminal is a strategic foundation for continued growth at Cmo Port for the future. It will function like a rail harbor, as it will allow unit trains with different products for various customers to move to and from Cmo Port. In 2017, we applied for 3 grants. We applied for a Tiger, an Infra, and a Build. In 2018, in December of 18, Congressman Smith and Senator Blunt announced that Cmo Port was awarded a $19.8 million build grant, that is 60% of our $33 million price tag for this terminal. And the remaining funds are coming from some local bonds, and then some money that we are getting from the state of Missouri through the ports is helping match as well. I know that the task force here is to look at supply chain issues, and right now our port and our tenants really haven't experienced any major supply chain issues to date. I'm sure there are some trying to get rail cars in, but that typically is a Class I railroad issue, not necessarily supply chain. But we do have some concerns. One of them, as we're working through this terminal project, the last phase of our terminal is the transload conveyor and barge loadout. And it's going to have a considerable amount of steel. And if anybody knows, steel prices are through the roof and the availability is pretty minimal. So that's going to be one of our concerns. Another concern that we have, I've talked about all the different things that we can do at the port. Obviously, the harbor is our heart of our port. So this is more of a federal concern, maybe not necessarily a state concern, but I know it needs to be addressed, is consistent funding for dredging of the harbor. Now, I know Cmo Port's not the only port in the state that utilizes the Corps to dredge their harbor. So all of our ports are in the same need, not just Cmo Port. But if we don't get our harbor dredged on a yearly basis, there's a chance that all of our tenants would have to shut down. Obviously, before we would let it get that far, Cmo Port would go over and beyond to try to figure out and scrounge up money to be able to pay for dredging of the harbor, because we would hate to see all of these families without a job. We've been fortunate the last couple of years that even though we're told there's no funding, the Corps always finds money at the last hour, which has been very nice, and it's very fortunate. But sometimes, you get too far in, and if they don't find that funding, what are we going to do? And if there's a high water situation, that becomes a problem too. So I want to take my Cmo Port hat off for just a moment, and I want to talk about MPAA. Up until recent years, federal grant funds were very scarce. Cmo Port was very fortunate in their early years that they were able to get grants early on, but more ports, not just in Missouri, but more ports were coming about, and the money was pretty hard to very competitive to get. Most of the federal programs, they want new or retained jobs attached to those federal requests. The ports are like, if you build it, they will come, because a lot of times we can see that need. It's not like we know whether a road needs to be here, but sometimes if you build that railroad track, it will be used. We've built track in the past, and people have said we will not, we've offered it, and all of a sudden, as soon as it's built, we've had 4 people come in and say, I need this track space. So sometimes we don't have those jobs specifically just for building that infrastructure. And most of the ports are up and coming in Missouri. We have a few that are, I'm going to say, fully developed. I know I've used this analogy in the past. We have some ports who are adolescents, myself included. We're walking, we're able to take care of ourselves, but you have some ports who may have the land and maybe have one tenant available. They just don't have that revenue source. They don't have extra jobs. They need to get that going. And then there are some ports who have just announced that they're a port, and they don't have the land yet. They don't have an infrastructure in place. So these ports don't have jobs to attach, and they may only have a few jobs to retain. So the advantage of us getting state funding is that jobs have not been required to receive these funds. The state funding that the ports have received, it does come from general revenue, which is under control of the state legislator. And if revenues are down, there have been times that our funding does get cut. We've been lucky, though, the last few years, there has been a base amount added to the MoDOT core budget for ports. When the funding is available, it must get spent in that fiscal year, which runs July 1st to June 30th. That means a port does not get a full construction season, which typically is April to October. And I can tell you from experience right now, because in our loop track project, we are doing an earthwork. There's earthwork portion of this. Our contractor was shut down in February. They're not back on site yet, so we're at their mercy. So we don't get a full construction season. Sometimes the funds are awarded in July. We may not get our contracts until August, and we only have until the following June to spend it. There are times when you go out for your engineer. If you don't have it pre-engineered, it can take up to 6 months before you're ready to go to construction. I I just mentioned that my contractor went off-site in February. So that's about the time that we could start doing construction projects.
Excuse me,
And-
Mandy,
Yes,
can
sir.
I kind of emphasize that point? This is a real structural flaw in the budgeting process in Missouri. We see this across the board. You can't, as a owner-operator, commit to the construction program until you know the money is there. But having a single fiscal year to then execute all of your project development, you can't commit to the project development ahead of whether or not you know that there is construction money. And to put a little historical context on this, what Mandy mentioned, just 5-6 years ago, the list of really critical capital improvements with the Port Association about 5 years ago, in a very constrained list, I might add, was about $100 million. We were appropriating approximately $3 million a year in general revenue toward this capital list. Now, construction inflation runs about $3 million a year. We were essentially just doing nothing. We're not making any progress whatsoever keeping up with inflation. Recent years have been much better, averaging between 8 and 11 million a year. So on a percentage basis, that's a huge gain. Still only 5 points ahead of inflation. And that was then. Inflation is higher now, as you mentioned with steel. But the notion that we're being, this is really a penny-wise and pound-foolish approach to capital budgeting. And this kind of goes across all of state government, in my opinion. It's an attempt to have fiscal constraint in the budget process, which is absolutely, this is what elected officials are elected to do, is to watch the money. But when it comes to capital projects, the idea that you can just drop one out of the sky on July 1, the minute the money is available, is not realistic. And you cannot commit the resources out of your operating budget to do the project delivery ahead of time. We find this with several things that we work on the road and bridge side as well. But it is a constraint in the state of Missouri that is being dealt with much better in other states. We see opportunity funds that build. We see separate trust funds that get established, revolving funds to deal with these sorts of things. I'd love to, as part of this task force, I would love to see, a recommendation that we might be able to make in terms of dealing with the capital budget on critical infrastructure. If we feel like if we're building, state facilities and we have to keep to that same fiscal year, that it's even a challenge with that. But the notion that we don't have multi-year capacity for capital construction. And the problem is, and people think this is a low probability, but it happens. You could have, you're halfway through your project, you haven't fully expended the available funds. What if the majority party changes or something happens? You go for reappropriation to continue the project and the money isn't there. That's a real problem, because then the taxpayers don't get anything for that except a partially completed, unusable project. And now, and I really was excited to see, because of the federal investments, the ports have come with what I would say is a more aggressive capital plan. That's maybe, but it's good. I mean, we should be looking at what the needs are. It's over $400 million. So I'd say even at current rates of appropriation, we're still below the rate of inflation. And we really need to think of this at this time when there are available resources in the state. So I'll turn it back to you.
Patrick's point as well, $11 million, there's 16 ports. I mean, not every port gets sometimes a piece of the pie. So there's that issue as well. And like I said, a construction season is April to October. We get our money July 1st to June 30th. We work on the river. We're at the mercy of Mother Nature. And if that river comes up, in 2019, the river was up from January until August. we missed a whole construction season that year. So had we got that money, I mean, unfortunately, we would have had to turn around and give that back to MoDOT and say, I really appreciate, or the legislators, and say, I really appreciate you giving us money, but Mother Nature took over our project. So there are time constraints. Had we had 2 years, it would have been a little bit, it would have been an easier blow on us because we had more time to build. So that, again, the 2-year allocation, if there was a way to make a 2-year allocation, I mean, we have fought for years to put our money in MoDOT's core budget because it doesn't typically get cut as easy when it's in MoDOT's budget. Not always. I know it's happened.
Sure.
Trust me, I fight for that every year, but I'm not sure what the answer to that.
Yeah. I mean, we have a capital budget that doesn't function like a capital budget. There may also be ways to look at this for, an ability to create a dedicated funding stream that could go into a trust fund. We have it in aviation. It's not earth-shattering in terms of the money that it generates, but it's a baseline that can be counted on. And policymakers made the determinations through legislation as to what is eligible for expenditure in that fund, and I would think the same here. To be honest, it would make sense that all modes of transportation have their own trust fund, revolving fund, that sort of thing, so that you could separate out the capital from the operating budgets and still make the progress when you need on the capital budget.
So I just want to give you one short example because I want to kind of bring all this together. So like I mentioned, Cmo Port, our loop track terminal, it came with a large price tag of $33 million. If Cmo Port was unable to obtain a federal grant and we were to fund this through our own funds and potentially MoDOT to get state funding, it would have taken us about 15 to 30 years to piecemeal that project together. And again, it would depend on when the availability of the funding, if we get 11 million this year, or if it's only 2 million, it would depend on that funding availability. And since, obviously, since there was a time constraint on the project, we did go into the federal force funding sources. So to recap, federal issue would be dredging of our harbors. I know you guys probably can't do a whole lot about steel prices and availability of steel, but that is one. And then, of course, the allocation of funding, whether it's a dedicated funding source, a 2-year appropriation would be nice, at least, where we would have that capability. So those are my 3 takeaways.
Sorry about that. Mandy has a quick question. So Delta Regional Authority, what role might they play in supporting the port, or do they at all?
They do, actually. We've actually received money from DRA in years past. Again, though, they want jobs attached to that money.
Right. Yep.
And only the Southeast Missouri ports, goes up to St. Genevieve. So you've got 5 ports that in the state of Missouri that has access to that funding, which is kind of nice because I'm not competing with everybody. But at the same time, it's not fair to everybody either. But again, if you don't have jobs attached to it, it's hard. It's a lot more competitive to get that funding. And we've used them 4 times now.
We've seen other states that have extended kind of the Port Authority geographically, and there's that opportunity because sometimes in receiving federal grants, size matters, right? So do you see any opportunities for Missouri to consider that sort of activity?
We've talked, I've talked to Cheryl and a couple of other ports about maybe doing a multi-port grant because the money for the smaller ports is there and it's available, but sometimes you get better bang for your buck if you do go after a bigger pot of money. So if we could find somebody to help administer that to where, this port gets their amount of, be able to allot it. Cmo Port, Pemiscot County Port, and New Madrid County Port Authority did a port security grant about 12 years ago, maybe 15 at this point, and they did a multi-port grant, and they received a significant amount of money for security at their ports, and it was well received. The other thing I will tell you in your packet, again, I know that there's a lot of information, but the very last back here, if you want to see what the terminal, the loop truck terminal, this gives you some information on the project itself. But this is just a rendering of what the project is going to look like. So, we're pretty excited. We are about a third of the way through the project. We have a year to complete it, so it's just knocking on our doors, so.
Congratulations with that. I know that was, we had the commission down several years ago, and it was really just on the drawing board at that point. So seeing it to come to fruition has taken kind of Herculean efforts. And honestly, what we've got to figure out as a state is to not make it so difficult to build out infrastructure that actually supports the economy.
Exactly.
And jobs in the state, and gives, takes advantage of the river system that we have to get our Missouri agricultural communities' products to market cheaply and efficiently and effectively. So I see we have Dustin's got his hand up. Dustin?
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. That was an excellent presentation. I had a question for you in terms of how much volume actually goes through the Cmo Port is the first question. And then the second part to that is, where does that rank in terms of the 16 public ports that you mentioned?
Okay, I think you asked me how much the volume was. Barge tonnage is around 1 million to 1.5 million on any given year. If you take into consideration our truck tonnage and our rail tonnage, we're looking at about a little over 2 million tons every year. And if you look at the ranking of the ports, I would have to almost default that to Cheryl, but I believe that Cmo, Pemiscot, and New Madrid County are the top 3 ports in the state of public ports. So we hold about 75% of the tonnage for that. And then if you look at all ports across the state, so public and private, again, the three of us are the top 10% of the state, hold 10% of the state's tonnage.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mandy, just a kind of a passing thought. Do you see there being a role for inland ports as well in a state like Missouri to be able to really take advantage of, or maybe have multiple options for moving, particularly as we're moving things off the river in some cases, not so much at your port here, but in more congested areas, having an ability to kind of transload and ship out of the congested area, and then have additional capacity to transload from there and move to the, both rail and the roadways.
Most definitely. I joke that when I go to Jeff City, I try not to take I-70. I don't like to play speedway racing with the truck drivers. If you were to look at the amount of trucks that go on a barge, so there's about 70 trucks that would go on a barge. That's 70 less trucks that I have to play race car with on I-70. If you were to take a whole tow, so a 15 barge tow down the river, and just, even if you were to take it to St. Louis and it was go to rail or how, maybe even on down to New Orleans, you're taking about 700 trucks off the road total. Now, I'm not here to, I don't want to say that I don't like the roads, because I do. I drive them every day. But the congestion, like, we have people looking at leaving St. Louis area to get product on the river, like from rail onto the river, because it is so congested. I've had companies that found out about the loop track, and they've called us and said, what can we do? Because Memphis is getting congested, St. Louis is congested. I'd already left Chicago, and I'm trying to find some other place. So I do, and it's not just Cmo Port. I would say all of them would definitely be a benefit to all of them.
Yeah, I think we all have to look at this as not so much as even though the modes do compete on a, private industry competes, But we're looking at projections of freight movement that we need all of these modes functioning and actually, blending together in a way that creates some seamlessness to the freight movement. So we're going to need all of these solutions, and it's a matter of moving away from this constraint that we have on funding critical infrastructure. Caitlin, I think, has a question.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It was really informative. My question specifically on the dredging cost. On an annual basis, what would you say the dredging cost for the port?
So before this year and inflation, it was about $500,000. They've already projected it to be closer to $600 to maybe $750 this year. That's just an estimation. Of course, we don't know what gas prices or diesel prices are going to do. At this point, we don't know what, on all modes we don't know what's going to happen to them. So in years past, it's been about $500,000. And that also depends on how much silt we have in the harbor. If we don't have a high water year, a high water event, we don't have as much silt in our harbor. So again, it kind of plays off on the river as well, what the river does.
Yeah, thank you so much. And typically, what month does the dredging take place, or what season of the year does that take place in?
Cmo Port typically gets dredged in the fall. I want to say that all the ports in Southeast Missouri get dredged around Labor Day.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great.
I
Oh,
was just,
sure.
I'll talk to them more when I get my opportunity, but we just brought in 30 sea containers to Southeast Missouri, and then we turned around and split them back out across the country because of the West Coast, how congested the ports are out there. So,
Sorry, we're trying to get it on.
Right.
am I live? Am I hot? Okay, yeah, we'll try to do it best. And, yeah, we just brought in 30 sea containers because we're paying almost $200,000 a week in demurrage on the West Coast because we can't get it in anywhere right now. It wasn't cost effective to go into Chicago, but I definitely need to get your contact information because it's something we're revisiting.
Most
We
definitely.
haven't looked at ports in a while because of the cost, but times have changed, so.
Exactly.
And it's definitely an opportunity for us as well.
And I will say containers, I mean, we have the availability to do containers on barge. We did them when we first opened back in the early 80s. They did container on barge then. And we have a customer that does container on rail. It's not very many, but we do have that capability as well.
I'll just say if we actually make a connection here that speeds up the freight movement for someone, this is worth the whole, formation of the task force in itself, just on that one movement. So thanks, Will. Yep, please.
So Mandy, quick question for you. I really appreciated your comments regarding, the requirement as far as retaining jobs or new job creation. So if you were in a position to provide suggestions as far as what criteria should be used at a federal level or state level for the 16 ports that all are submitting, for funding, what would you suggest should be considered to differentiate who should get funding and who may have to wait for the next year or 5 years?
If you could look at what the vitality is going to happen to the economy once it is in place. And I know sometimes that's kind of hard because, like I said, we've done things where we've built track and we have not had anybody say, I want this track, I'm going to utilize this. And we've built 4 tracks, and within 2 months of building said tracks, we had a meeting in our office, and a gentleman sat out the window and was like, I need to lease all of those tracks. I have small cuts of cars I want to bring in. It's hard to put a value on that. I don't know how I could put even a economic value to that, but I know without a doubt, I know that it's my word. I would hold it golden, but I know it would be used. But again, I don't know if, I know some of the grants, they come back in 3 years and want to see what you've done, what has been the benefit of this. If you could come back and say that, oh, well, I've added 10 jobs that we didn't think we were going to add, or we've had private investment of $4 million, over that. Cmo Port once this project is complete, we will have about $60 million of investment in our port, and that's public funds. We already have close to $70 million of private investment in our port alone. So I know Cheryl's office keeps those numbers, and of course, my predecessor, Dan Overby, his philosophy was, I have a penny, how many nickels can you get out of it? We stretch that. I don't really know the answer to that, Mary, just because I wouldn't know how to justify that.
But I think he answered it. I think it's market confidence, and it's similar to the market that we're in right now for developers when they're building a spec warehouse.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's based on that market confidence, and I think based on the track record that we're experiencing right now. And then the other thing that Patrick had mentioned as far as what does the future look like? And all the projections are indicating that freight volumes are going to increase significantly, and we need to position ourselves to be ready for that, not only to support ports like yourself, but also the state and the nation.
Exactly. Well, and if we could, I know we can't bring the ships up the Mississippi River, like, I know that story. But if you could take the containers off the ships, say in New Orleans, and bring them upriver, I have, without a doubt, there would not be the congestion that we have on the West Coast, or even on the East Coast. But, yeah, I don't know that any port couldn't handle that extra tonnage and getting those products out to where they need to go. You're welcome.
That's great, good points. Mandy, thank you for your presentation. Thanks for being here today and for all the work that you're doing. Good luck with the remaining construction.
Thank you.
On that, and for finding new customers right here in the room.
Yes,
So
most
good-
definitely.
good.
You guys will have to
Well,
come back when we're done, and
That's
so you
right.
can see that.
Absolutely. Wonderful, thank you. Next up, we have Chris Peters. He's the logistics manager at Nestle Purina. I'm going to talk about supply chain for rural industry. Really appreciate you taking some time and being with us today, and I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think we got a few slides coming up. So, yeah, my name's Chris Peters. I'm the logistics manager for Nestle Purina Pet Care in Bloomfield, Missouri, just about 26 miles west of here. I also want to say thank you to Mr. Wyman from MoDOT for the opportunity to speak, and thanks Mrs. Cheryl Ball for slotting me in behind Mandy. Mandy and I, we've known each other for several years, and we have a great working relationship with Cmo Port. We literally pass thousands of rail cars through that facility every year. And to Mandy's point, when she's talking about building for the future, she's talking about their loop track, and we have our eyes on that too. No promises, Mandy, but we do, right? So anyway, today as well, Dana Gaffney, who's our regional transportation manager, unfortunately, she was not able to make it today. She had some critical transportation needs pop up today, as it is in the volatile business we're in. So, was there a few slides popping up? Oh, I've got it. Okay. So, just a little bit about who we are. We're the only litter factory to produce lightweight, and we support about 46% of the U.S. Tidy Cat litter business. So, and Mary, our conversation prior to the meeting, thank you for being a loyal Purina pet food customer, and probably more importantly than that, your dedication to be willing to adopt rescue pets too. So that says a lot. So appreciate that. We started the operations there in 1976, so the industry's been there a long time. We actually just had a retiree just recently who was there from the beginning retire. So we're on about 11.8 acre footprint. We do have several hundred more acres outside of that to support our clay business. We got a warehouse. It's an automated warehouse that we're getting into production. It has a 62,000 pallet warehouse capacity. So staffing wise, we're about 470 folks total, which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but we're highly automated, and we're expanding all the time. We truck about, I'll talk about rail here in just a minute, near and dear to my heart. We truck about 120 to 160 truckloads out of our facility every 24 hours, 24/7 around the clock. As I said before, we've added several jobs over the last 5 years, and we're also thankful that Governor Parsons has had the opportunity to come visit our facility as well. We operate a private rail car fleet. I got 440 on there. It's probably pushing 500. And those rail cars, we run them from western Wyoming, as you see there, New Mexico. We also boat or vessel some product over from Greece that we transload at Brunswick, Georgia, and get that up to us. So we are part of the global economy as well. From a packaging standpoint, I don't have that slide up here. We also get supplies from Europe, Southeast Asia, and Indonesia. So just gives us a little perspective of the scale that we're looking at. So an interesting fact, we also pay a nominal airspace fee because we have a bridge that goes over a state highway. I've got my paid permit right here in case anybody's looking, right? So Nestle has made a direct capital investment over the last few years of over $400 million into our facility. And working with the Boot Hill Regional Planning Commission in a grant-in-kind opportunity. From an infrastructure standpoint, Y Highway into our facility is in pretty good shape. The BRPC was great to work with. We did some widening and resurfacing of the highway. But when I was thinking about what do we need, this may seem like a little bit of small ball here, but I want to speak to the signage issues into our facility that may be impacting other facilities across the state. So I made this intentionally small, but right there where the big black arrow is, that says Nestle Purina, right by the telephone pole and by the hay bales there for effect. And due to our geographical location, when I reviewed the outdoor advertising rules and regulations, I certainly understand that you got to have policies in place. But in our particular situation is we're 6 miles north of Bloomfield, actually. And you would think with truckers and carriers today, they got GPS and they got everything else and they know where to go. But with today's tight capacity, truckers blow right past this entrance, going both ways, north and south. And the issue here is because we're considered a non-conforming sign, and we're non-conforming because that sign's not within 750 feet of a deemed viable business, which in fact, 1 mile up the road, there are 2 viable businesses that are open Monday through Friday. So the statute says anything visible to a controlled route, in our case, can't be bigger than an 8x8 wooden sign. And we're 4x8 right here. And it must be wood. It's not illuminated, and I'm sure it would take some kind of legislative measure to reconsider businesses like us who are in a remote facility, but we're a powerhouse of trucking, and go from there. Go on here for a second. Since Mandy went over, and I'm glad she did, because mine's going to be a little bit shorter. Moving off of signage, from a railroad standpoint, we have a great relationship with our local UP out of Poplar Bluff, the local service yard. As we say, not only do we transload a lot at the port, we also bring direct shipments into the plant via rail. The ask I would have there is the local guys are pretty good. The mainline UP that runs right adjacent to our property, there's a lot of times they do mainline repair. The track also crosses Y Highway, and there's sometimes they do repair there. And there's a lack of a point of contact, which would be myself, to say, hey, we're going to repair this track, which is going to disrupt your service, right? So if there's any pull with that, that would definitely help. Matter of fact, I was driving to work yesterday and I heard it on the radio, hey, Y Highway's crossed, is stopped at the railroad crossing. So if you can imagine 120 to 160 trucks coming here and all the carriers and everything that you have to contact to say, you can't come in this way, that's a huge disruption for us. So moving on the transportation side, this is Dana's part, so I hate to read verbatim here, but She just passed me the notes this morning. So last year, our facility, we shipped 33,600 trucks in 2021. The market right now is having a hard time with capacity. I think it's going to remain that way the next 2 to 3 years. We're seeing a lot of tender rejections. It's about 33% because, of course, everybody is going to drop you to go to the next highest load or the next most profitable load for them. About 3 years ago, we were about 80% asset-based carriers, and by that, we have a drop lot. We can hold 500 drop trailers there. And we need that. That sounds like a lot, but it's just 3-4 days worth. Now we're going to a lot of brokered carriers, a lot of live carriers as well. There's a lot of carriers in our region, unfortunately, that are closing their doors. They've been operating on razor-thin margins. So carrier struggles, pardon me, is that they're losing quite a few drivers. Any kind of initiative to get drivers trained and in that role would definitely be a boon to our business. As everybody knows, parts for trucks, if anybody in here is carrier, is very hard to get. So when you do have down equipment, it's going to be down. And ordering new trucks and trailers, just like personal vehicles, is really becoming, the lead times on those are just astronomical. Fuel hikes, I don't think you can do anything about fuel, but I'll throw it out there anyway. We all feel that in our pocketbooks right now too. So definitely living in a very volatile and uncertain time right now. So what carriers look for, for being a shipper of choice is obviously they look at where your facility is and road conditions in there. It goes without saying. Mentioned weather conditions and the like. So maintenance of the roads is vitally important. And, we want to get drivers in and out, obviously, as safely and efficiently as possible. So that is, like I said, that was pretty short and sweet, but that's kind of the needs we were facing there at the plant.
How are you responding in real time to some of these challenges that you mentioned, particularly with the, you mentioned 33% tender rejections. That's kind of stunning, and that's just got to be putting a huge operational strain on you.
Currently, it is, yes. There's a point of profitability you have to maintain, and we just keep contacting carrier after carrier, and the advantage we do give there is the fact that we've got plenty of freight, so there's a repeatability of that business. But sure, there's no recourse when somebody locks in a load and then somebody else calls them and says, hey, we can do this for a few dollars more. So we're really at the mercy of what the carriers are doing. And we have some great partners in carriers, don't get me wrong.
Sure. We have a question from Dustin.
Hey, Chris, thank you for your presentation. I'm on the direct opposite side here. I'm on the carrier side, and actually a carrier by the name of CFI, and looks like Nestle is actually a customer of ours. So it's very interesting to me to hear a lot of the things that you comment on, and I would thank you, one, because what I pick up in your conversation is your focus on trying to be a shipper of choice. Yeah. And I'll tell you that from a carrier side of the business, today, we are trying to gather data and input from the customers that we partner with on best practices from the shipper side so that we can go back and educate our customer partners on what we believe makes them a shipper of choice. So when I hear you talk about things about improving signage, about improving roadways, about doing those things that make it safer and easier for a driver to get to your facility, those are exactly the kind of things that carriers are beginning to look at when they think about who they're going to partner with. And, something I would throw out to the task force is I believe there's an opportunity for us as an initiative out of the work that we're doing here to think about understanding from a carrier side and a shipper side, what is a shipper of choice? What is the criteria that can get shippers recognized for this level of commitment to helping be an easier business to operate with when it comes to the supply chain community? And, again, I mentioned this in a couple of sessions earlier. I think it's easy to go back to the public sector and start talking about things like, well, we got to improve roadways and rest stops. And while all those things are certainly an opportunity, I tell you, one of the easiest things and the best things we can do is begin to educate the private side of the industry on a lot of the things that Chris shared with us this afternoon. So, really good stuff. There's just a lot, I think, in this area for us to consider. But I appreciate all of your comments today, Chris. They were spot on.
Okay, appreciate that, Dustin.
Great. We have, Caitlin has a question as well.
Yes, I agree. It was a great presentation. One of the slides that was actually in the documents that was emailed to us, I don't know if we got to it. I think it was the very last slide. It talked a little bit about Bloomfield transportation and noted that it ships also out of, to Canada, Mexico, Argentina, Peru, France, and Russia. I'm really curious, out of the Bloomfield, are you because one of the issues, I'm a freight forwarder, and one of the issues that we're experiencing is a lot of steamship lines are rejecting export freight. So, for instance, if we went to them and said, hey, we want a contract out of Bloomfield, Missouri to all of those international destinations, it used to be extremely easy to get those types of contracts. Now ocean carriers are extremely selective. I was just wondering, is that something that falls within your team's responsibility, the international side of it? And if you could just touch on some of the challenges you guys are experiencing in the
I'm
global
sorry, there may have been a cutout there.
Can you hear me?
Caitlin, we lost you there for just a second. Yeah, we can now. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yeah, let me try this. Can you hear me?
Okay, thanks. Yes. Yes, go ahead. Well,
Okay, any luck?
yes, now we've got you.
Gotta love technology.
Yeah, happens to all
Okay.
of us.
Yep.
So I know I'm super delayed because I can hear my echo, so I'll just keep going. But what I was really touching on is the international transportation out of Bloomfield, Missouri, and what some of the challenges you guys are experiencing to some of your international export destinations.
Yeah, obviously, I think, one of the biggest challenges we have is just getting the containers in volume. That is in short supply. That's probably number one. I wish Dana were here. She could probably answer this much more in detail than I can. So I may have to take a rain check and then provide you some of that information at a later time. But yeah, the container volume itself is pretty tough.
Sure.
I
Thank
got a
you.
quick question. Chris, great presentation. So let's go back to workforce and truck drivers. In your opinion, is the issue a lack of funding for training? Is it a lack of interest of people wanting to be a truck driver? Are there insurance issues? Is it marketing that people just aren't aware? And I guess the other question is there anything transformational we can do in this area or the state of Missouri to try and shake this up? Because in my opinion, based on the direction we're going, I have a feeling that if we meet and have the same meeting 5 years or 10 years from now, and if we continue down this path, I'm not sure if we're headed in a direction where we're going to do something transformational and address the issue.
Right. That's definitely a hard question to answer because there's a lot of different motivations to join that industry as a driver, right? Is it time at home? Is it time away? Is it pay? Is it the model of the truck? Is it how far do I got to go? So, if I don't know the best way to incentivize to draw that crowd. probably one of your members on the task force probably knows better than I do. That's a tough question to answer.
Okay, but the point is the need is immense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Chris, Mr. Peters, thank you for your presentation, very informative. Dustin, did you have another question?
Very briefly, Director McKenna, I was just going to comment. Chris, I think you guys, your company is on a path. I think you do understand some of the right things to help curb the labor challenges we have. And I'll tell you one quick comment here, and I heard you say that, oftentimes a carrier is turning your freight down, and so then you're forced to go with another capacity solution that's going to cost you more money. And I think from the shipper side, if there's a focus on doing things to be easier to work with from a driver engagement standpoint and driver-friendly standpoint, carriers will partner with some shippers who may pay a less rate if they know it's going to be a good situation for the drivers and their driving team members. So we're able to go out and hire more drivers if we have customers who are committed to that philosophy moving forward. So I just wanted to add to your comment there, but it does seem like you guys are on the right staff with this, or the right track with this shipper of choice mentality that you're taking.
Yeah, that's right. Your comments reminded me, we do have a truck scale on site. That's very advantageous to the trucking industry. And we offer incentives as well that our top 3 on-time carriers, we give those folks free scale for a month. And so we got a little bit of a competitive going on there. And anybody that pulls up with a furry friend in their truck, we also give them treats.
Well, that's great. Very much appreciate you being here, sharing your issues and your opportunities there. This is great information for the task force to have, so.
Okay,
Thank
I
you for your
appreciate
time,
your
sir.
time. Thank you.
Great. All right, next up, we have Mr. Will Ryan with Do It Best. Already doing it best in the room, trying to secure some freight, which is fantastic. But going to talk about global distribution from rural Missouri. Really appreciate your time as well. We know you're busy, so thank you for taking an opportunity to meet with us and let us know what your issues and challenges are and what opportunities you think this task force can help with.
Okay, no, thank you for having me. I got the call from Cheryl on Monday. I was actually off remulching my yard, getting ready for the spring, which is the exact same thing we're doing at work right now, is we're getting ready to start selling all our spring goods, all of the construction. What Do It Best is we are the largest U.S.-based single-source hardware, lumber, and building materials co-op in the industry. You're probably more familiar with some of our competitors like Ace, True Value. We're all in the same field. What Do It Best does a little bit differently is we don't necessarily require that our stores are branded Do It Best Corp. You probably walked into a hardware store and had no idea they were Do It Best, but they get a majority of their inventory from us. So, just a little bit of background about me and about Do It Best Corp before I jump into some of our issues and everything. I grew up in this area about 45 miles south in Malden, Missouri. When I joined Do It Best Corp 6 years ago, it was a move back home for me. I took off after college, went and lived in Detroit for a while, Nashville, moved around the country kind of following the auto industry for a while, and then followed it south. And as it all came crashing down in 2008 and 2009, I said, I got to switch gears now and start doing something with a little bit more stability and everything else. So ended up being in logistics versus being a tier 2 automotive supplier. But I've really enjoyed this job and most of all, this company I work for. Do It Best Corp, we have 8 warehouses across the country, ranging from New York to Oregon, strategically placed to keep our membership happy and supplied with their inventory. Our building, we're the newest warehouse, but the oldest location. It was opened back in Cape Girardeau back in 1971, and then in 2012, 2013, moved down here to Sykeston. We've been in operation here in Sykeston now. I think in January is where we hit our 8-year mark. I never worked in the Cape facility, but it was right on the diversion channel on Nash Road there. Landlocked, older building, wasn't much you could do. It was much smaller than the current footprint we're in. So our current building is about 550,000 square foot. We're on 110 acres, so we have plenty of room for expansion. We carry about 67,000 different SKUs in our building, or unique items that are available for our membership. We have roughly 3,800 members across the country. We have stores in 50 other countries. And right now we've been one of the industries that has really thrived through the pandemic, and we've seen several record sales years through this. We went from being a 3.2 billion company. We've exceeded $5 billion in sales the last 2 years and are on pace to do it again this year. So we've been very fortunate there. Jumping down into some of the issues, I mean, it's definitely been, labor workforce has been very difficult for the last couple of years. We've fortunately, knock on wood, gotten to a pretty comfortable place where we're at right now. We currently employ about 175 people, including managers, but at a high during the pandemic, we hit around 230, 235. We actually put another night shift on to support our small parcel business going directly to the customers. We were able to absorb it back onto days in November of last year, but we also did it without having any layoffs. So it was a good thing for us, just absorbing and becoming more efficient on day shift to handle that kind of volume. The Sykeston Warehouse, or our retail service centers, we call them, we service about 850 members out of our building. We go into 12 states, including Missouri, and then we also do have some international business. Sykeston was selected due to our geographic location to carry what we call central stock. We've got about 5,000 SKUs that Sykeston's the only building that carries them, and we'll typically ship them via parcel out to freight forwarders or to our warehouses on the coast. They combine them with an international shipment to make it a little bit easier there. So we just started doing that in the last year or two, and it grew sales here in Sykeston by about $5 million a year. So put us in, usually we're in first place on our sales out of our 8 warehouses. So a lot of things have been going good there. We just signed up a new member in Colorado, so we're starting to go into Colorado from here now, and think about just shipping hardware. We're traveling all the way to the border of Colorado now just to keep stock on the shelves for some of our members. From a logistics standpoint, we don't own our own fleet. We partner with Ryder. Ryder is a very strategic partner with us. We don't call them a vendor. We don't call them a supplier. They are a business partner with Do It Best. They're in 6 out of 8 of the warehouses that we use. They actually have an office inside the building with us. Currently, we've got about 36 drivers and 4 or 5 shuttle drivers on their payroll, and a few office staff and everything. And it varies from center to center. But just there, we're seeing a lot of the same problems. Even though they're not Do It Best drivers, they wear Do It Best uniforms. They see our stores more than we do. Finding, recruiting, and retaining drivers has become very difficult. The nature of our business, too, is we sell 20-foot pipe, we sell mulch, we sell concrete. Drivers are having to fingerprint a lot of the stuff that we load. I mean, our shippers load it manually, and we're unloading it manually. Obviously, if we can get it on a pallet and shrink wrap it and move it with a forklift or a tow motor, it's a lot better. But there's still a lot of stuff, a lot of different items that we carry that just, you simply have to put your hands on them to get them on and off the truck. Makes it difficult for us to find people to load them, and then from the rider standpoint on finding people who are willing to unload it. I know they've done a lot of incentives and pay per stops, and they have a variety of different incentive programs to retain drivers, but I know they've struggled, even before the pandemic, they were struggling to find drivers, and this has just made it a lot worse. As far as suggestions there, listening to Chris and everybody, I don't have the golden ticket for how to get more people involved in the trucking industry. My dad was a truck driver for 35 years. I grew up on truck driver money and those paychecks and everything. So he was gone some of the times, and yeah, it's a difficult work-life balance. It's not for everybody. But I think just a better education there. I don't know, schooling-wise, grants for students who want to pursue something like that. Again, don't have the golden ticket for making people want to drive a truck, but it's definitely something, along with some of the other trade skills, that we're going to have to focus on in the next few years. But truck drivers is definitely one of them that we need to improve on. As far as some of the supply chain issues, I mentioned that we carry about 67,000 different unique SKUs. One of our metrics for success there is, we call it our fill rate or our service level. Typically, Sykeston ran around in the 97% range on service level. And it's not that we had 97% of our current inventory or current SKUs. It's for every 100 items members ordered, we had 97 of them, typically on the shelf. Since the pandemic, we've been ranging to as low as 60%, and then we probably range in the low 70s to high 70s right now. And it peaks and valleys depending on weather and everything else, because we're on allocation from a lot of our vendors. I mean, if they're making items, depending on how much we fit into their sales model, we'll get only so much. We order 100, we only get 20 of them because of where we fall in it. Like I said, we compete with Ace, we compete with Orgill. Not only that, you've got your Walmarts, your Home Depots, all the big box stores that we compete with for some of the same products as well. So that's something that's been definitely interesting with us. When I chimed in earlier to Mandy's presentation, we import about 10% of our SKUs from China. A lot of our private label do-it-best stuff comes from overseas. And we have got a mess on the West Coast right now with paying demurrage on containers. Everything's backlogged, it's congested, can't get it moved. Just recently, we brought 30 containers into Sykeston, chopped them up and split them back out and sent them up to the other 7 warehouses because it was cheaper than paying demurrage and letting stuff sit on the coast. And some of it we just simply needed. It's difficult to staff when you're bringing space heaters in March and turning around and shipping them back out because you're past that season, but they've been sitting on the coast since last summer. So we're trying to get them back on the shelf and everything. The port congestion has been a big problem. Natural disasters with Texas, the ice storms last year, all the petroleum places, the resin plants shutting down. I'd say of our SKU lines our product lines that we carry, paint has probably struggled the most just because they don't have the raw materials to make the paint that we sell. Your Sherman-Williams, all those different companies, they've just, and then being on allocation with them too. We're not getting the volumes that we used to. And it's been a housing market through all this. I mean, everybody's stuck at home or able to work from home now. I know when this first all started, my wife was complaining, why are you working 12, 14 hours a day? But then she'd give me a list of 10 things that need to be done around the house. I said, that's why I'm at work so long, because all of America's doing that right now. They're at home. According to Scott's, the vendor, they said there was 30 million new first-time gardeners at the beginning of the pandemic. And almost all of those came back the next year and bought supplies again. I think the number went up some, but that first year was, and that's astronomical, 30 million new first-time gardeners, in-home gardeners. And, even if they just kept a couple of those things, it really grew that market and grew some of the stuff that we sell. So I really want to reach out about the port access. I know we've talked about it. It's not something that I influence directly. We have a merchandising and purchasing group in our Fort Wayne corporate office. It's been talked about before. It's always been cost prohibitive, but I think that's something we're in different times now. We got to look at something that would be interesting to bring more goods in from the coast or from some of these vendors. Sykeston, being here on the 55, 57 corridor, we're in a strategic location. We're close to a lot of our vendors here in America, and a lot of the stuff coming off the coast. I mean, it's just easy to get to us. So it's made us a lot better. I guess from a funding standpoint, I don't know if this is state level and federal, but the finishing of the I-57 corridor, I know that's been talked about for a long time, but I just recently went down and delivered some inventory to one of our members in Pocahontas, Arkansas. So you go over to Poplar Bluff, roads are fine, you head towards the Arkansas border, you get about 10 miles, and then you go to 55 miles an hour in 2-lane, and there's still just as many trucks coming through there, and it's getting a lot more congested. It doesn't pick back up until you get down around Walnut Ridge and Newport. But, I mean, that would be, anything the state of Missouri could do to nudge the federal government about getting that done would be beneficial for us. It just goes back to making us a desired location. It's easier to get here. It's more convenient. I'd say that'd be one of my asks or things I'd like to bring up on a bigger level. And then just on the local level, I'd say just in employees, there's probably 1,000 vehicles that come down Rose Parkway over here behind us. And I know in Missouri, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. We don't get a lot of snow and ice, but I think that's something at a local level, if we got more support at clearing those roads quickly. We draw from probably a 50-mile radius on our employees, and a lot of times they'll say the interstate was fine, 61 was fine. I turned on H down here, and my last mile into the warehouse was the worst part of the drive. And you can't encourage people or give them the courage to get out and drive in this weather if they don't want to now. And a lot of people aren't comfortable driving in it, but I think anything we could do to make the road conditions better or give them that reassurance that the roads are going to be better when they do have weather conditions would definitely help us with getting more people to work in the weather events. So unfortunately or fortunately, we thrive in a lot of natural disasters when there's tornadoes, earthquakes, floods, all that stuff. You don't think about it, but busted pipes and space heaters and just the line of products that we sell. Chris and I were talking about the Mayfield tornadoes. We coordinated with Nestle and Orgill and some other local people We helped send a bunch of pallets and things over there, and now our stores over there, their sales went through the roof because people are replacing, they're repairing. So we do provide a pretty unique service of having it on the shelf when you need it more than anything. So being able to get to those locations after a natural disaster or after a problem like that is critical for us. So I didn't really know what I was going to be talking about when I came, so I reached out to my boss in Fort Wayne, the National Logistics Director, and we just got to talking and brainstorming and everything, and he mentioned there's a location, Findlay, Ohio, probably about an hour and a half east of Fort Wayne, Indiana, where we're located, and it was a pretty small town, and then they got a rail access directly to one of the Great Lakes, and they've boomed, and it's just, I went to online and just read some of their stuff and everything, and thought it was just a really interesting article in how much they grew their town. It's for about 43,000 people, the businesses they drew just by getting that direct access to a port and being able to bring in. They've got an Amazon facility, several other distribution centers, and just, I guess the reason he brought it up to me is some of the similarities in Sykeston in size and demographic and proximity to things and everything like that. So I thought it was an interesting study of what it can do for a town with that kind of access and infrastructure to major waterways or Great Lakes, whatever it might be. So, that's really the things I want to bring up with the I-57 corridor is making sure we take care of our local businesses when we do have the weather events, and then just start a dialogue with the task force about what can we do. I mean, I really didn't know what to expect coming in here, so it's and I tend to talk very fast, so I kind of got through this faster than I thought. So
You were talking faster than I could write, so.
my manager
But I
told me
write slow.
you have to
You know,
slow down.
It's like, no. It's excellent information. It's great to hear about the success of your company, the challenges that you're facing as well. We'll start right off with Caitlin, the question.
Yeah, it was a great presentation. Thank you so much. I love that you touched on demurrage. I've been waiting for someone to say the ugly word of demurrage because, it's something that we see every single day. And I apologize. I'm actually not there today because I was feeling under the weather. But in my presentation in April, I'll be speaking a lot on detention and demurrage and how it's affecting a lot of businesses in the United States. And I love that you also brought up the example of inventory that was meant to come in during a season and showed up a season later, and it's not going to sell as well, right? Your example of space heaters, I'm sure, they didn't sell as well as you had hoped for. And those types of consequences are really debilitating to businesses. And so I did kind of want to ask, I'm curious about your experiences. Are you guys able to fight any of the demurrage or the detention that you're being charged on any of your imports?
We're working with our expediter company on the West Coast. Part of it, if it's they're owning some of it. If it's labor shortages or space or
Yeah.
infrastructure issues on their end, they're a very good partner. We've been doing business with them for a while. They are going to help absorb some of it. But if it's simply just port congestion and things that are beyond both of our controls, I mean, it's something we're just going to have to eat in some cases. But they are working with us where they can to help absorb some of that cost.
Sure. And, I think too, another hopeful thing is, I know that at the federal level, the government, the Federal Supply Chain Task Force, along with the FMC, is really working to push forward the Ocean Reform Act, which will really help with specific ruling and regulations around detention and demurrage and give, companies like yours a little bit more transparency behind why certain things were charged. All of that is time consuming, right? To fight every single one of those invoices and bills. And so I think at a very minimum, we need to make sure that, the transportation community together is at least collaborative in making sure the decision making on, can you push back on these types of invoices? What are the reasoning behind things? So I will say that I think, it's hopeful because I do believe that the Ocean Reform Act, it will help to mitigate some of those detention and demurrage charges. But yeah, if I'll just offer it up too as a resource. If you ever need assistance on whether or not a certain scenario is valid for detention and demurrage. I have a great flow chart that I've made available to the public to kind of help internal logistics teams look at whether or not to question the detention and demurrage fees, which I'm more than happy to share with you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we're paying almost $200,000 a week right now for that West Coast demurrage. So we're having to get really creative on how do we get it moved across the country and then get it to where it needs to go ultimately. And we brought in 30 sea containers over the last 5 weeks or so. It took us a little while to get it all out here. And then we're turning around and building new loads to go back out. And you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We have a warehouse in Woodburn, Oregon on the coast. We're shipping it to Sykeston and then in some cases turning around and shipping it back to Woodburn. That's cheaper than paying all the demurrage and waiting for the product. So yeah, it's been very interesting.
And then just one last quick question. I'm not sure if you've already discussed this before, but if there was a container on vessel service that was initiated, that took let's just take your imports from China, that would come in south of New Orleans, and if there was a port made available, like the port that we were talking about earlier today, would that be a no-brainer for you guys to move it that way instead of bringing it into the West Coast?
I don't know. I mean, that's not something I'm really involved with directly here at the local level. But I mean, it's something I could definitely reach out to Fort Wayne. We've talked about it at a high level with the general managers. Is who has access to rail spurs, who has access to ports, and we've known it's available around here. And from what I've gathered, a lot of stuff was cost prohibitive at the time. But again, times have changed. We're doing things a lot differently now. We're buying in bulk with the uncertainty of when are we going to get more? So let's go ahead and buy way more than we did in the past and have that inventory. So I spoke with one of our purchasing people before coming this morning to get some facts and figures from him, and I'm definitely going to have a follow-up conversation with him about let's revisit this again. Let's look at port availability, rail availability near Sykeston. Does it make sense to start bringing it in a different way than truck lines? We know what the struggles are there. I'm not saying we want to take on a new set of headaches, but it might relieve some of the other ones. So,
yeah. Well, it sounds like you guys are doing a great job, and thank you again for the presentation.
You're welcome.
We have Dustin has a question.
Thank you, Director McKenna. A good presentation. I've got a question with you on, you said you're partnering with Ryder to support your fleet transportation. Is that correct?
Correct.
So are they supporting, I'm assuming then they're doing all of your DC to store transportation?
Yes.
So are all of the drivers involved in that particular portion of the business? I'm assuming they're all dedicated, and what I'm assuming as well, are they performing the same routes? Do they have predictability? Do they know exactly the stores are going to? It's very consistent.
Yes, that's a big retaining factor for them, is that they know I'm going to be driving the Nebraska route this week, week in and week out. I know when I'm going to be home. I know how long it'll take. Like I said, they're not Do It Best employees, but they wear Do It Best uniforms. They drive the big orange trucks, the big orange trailers. They see our members more often face to face than I'd ever think to be able to. And we have members call and say, I want this driver. I mean, they request certain drivers, or somebody gets put on another route, say, I want my driver back. They're not only a logistics success, but a commercial success for us on how much our members like some of our drivers, and just that reliability, dependability, and trust they get with the drivers that they're going to get their stuff and it's going to be on time. And communication, we've got a guy that's got everybody on his routes in his cell phone, and they've almost got a group text going. So, if he gets delayed 30 minutes, everybody knows and everybody's on board. So our good drivers are really good.
Yeah. Any idea what your turnover percentage is with those drivers?
I couldn't give you an accurate number off the top of my head, no. But I just know, talking with my counterparts in the dispatch office and everything, it's been a lot higher than it's been in the past.
Yeah. Well, again, that's a compliment to the work that you and your business continue to focus on that. I think the more successful shippers long term are going to be the ones that are more adaptable to the model that it sounds like you guys are really setting an example for there. Again, things that Chris mentioned earlier around, time at home, predictability, consistency becomes more of a routine, present less opportunities for headaches and things that, couldn't be predicted. And again, that makes a driver's life much more easier. But thank you for the information. And again, congratulations. You guys sound like you're doing some really great things there.
Thank you. We talked about desired locations. We were talking about that 3-4 years ago when the ratio is probably the same, 10 loads for every one driver. I mean, we were putting alternate shifts on, we had late appointments. We've tried a lot of different things with our vendors just to be a desired location. We want people to want to come see the Do It Best warehouse because it's easy to get in and easy to get out, so. I guess that's one other thing at the local level. Rose Parkway dead ends at where we're at. And I know it's been talked about before as making an extension that came back around and connected back to 61 on the other side of us, just as a thoroughfare, so they're not dead ending it at Do It Best. Would just be another point of entrance and egress. So,
Sure. Fantastic. Very interesting presentation. We really appreciate you taking time. You're maybe one of the busier people in the room right now. So we really do appreciate.
I've got a good team who's holding down the fort today. So.
And, speaking of that, Dr. Leathers got a call while he was here. Apparently somebody online knew he was in this part of the state and he got called away. And that person that called him away was Governor Parsons. So, because he's down here as well. So he sends his apologies that he wasn't able to stay, but we'll catch him up on everything. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for being here. Next up, we have Timmy Lynn Hunter, who's the Executive Director of New Madrid County Port. She's going to talk about, and I'd love to say that, I had thought the sequence out really well, but hearing all of the issues we just heard about the trucking and the movement and bringing containers in, this is kind of timely, so I'll give credit where it's due to Cheryl Ball for lining this up nicely to talk about container opportunities at New Madrid County Port. So I'll turn it over to Timmy Lynn, who's joining us remotely, and I appreciate you doing this. I know you have some other items going on, so thank you for taking the time and for joining us here today. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can. Thank you. Floor is yours.
Thank you. And I don't know how long I'll have the internet. I am at a remote location, like Patrick said, so we hope everything goes well. The New Madrid County Port Authority, I guess put up the slide, yeah. The New Madrid County Port Authority is a multimodal port located on the upper lower Mississippi River at River Mile 885. We're located in the 4,200 acre St. Jude Industrial Park, and we pay fees to the park based on the acreage we own. Slide, please. Oh, that's good. Keep it there. We're about 150 miles south of St. Louis and 110 miles north of Memphis. And our jurisdiction is from county line to county line. And we are in the Memphis district. I think that Pemiscot Port is also in the Memphis district. I think that Mississippi County Port is also in the Memphis district. Mississippi County Port is north of us, and Pemiscot County Port is south of us. Interstate 55 is less than a mile from the port property, and Interstate 57 is approximately 20 miles north of us. The port's located below the confluence of the Ohio River, and we are 520 road miles from the southernmost port on the Mississippi River. So you can see we're in a perfect location to handle containers on barge. The BNSF and the UP are the two Class 1 rail lines servicing the port, and New Madrid County Airport is within 2 miles of the port. Slide, please. As you can tell by this economic study done by the Missouri Department of Transportation, our small port does make a difference to the state of Missouri and to the folks in our region. As we've grown, our future investment needs have changed, and now we need a second Slackwater Harbor to include container capabilities. and we need the land to place additional industries at the site. This study tracks the investment from fiscal year 2014 to 2017. So you don't see the $122 million investment made by the private industries at the site from 2010 to 2013. And you don't see the additional 100 plus construction jobs that lasted for over a year and a half at the site while these companies were building. And you don't see that the tonnage before that growth was approximately 220,000 tons a year, or that $57 million of private investment has been made at the site since 2017. We really appreciate this piece of information and we've used it often. We would really like to see a new study done for the Missouri courts. We think this would be very helpful. Next slide, please. The private investments that we have made at the site have been made by our 3 tenants. The tenants have long-term leases with us. Next slide, please. Slide, please. Well, that's showing Riceland Foods there. The other 2 were on the slide before this were Nutrient Ag Solution and Nutrient. We have long-term leases with them. All 3 of these tenants have expanded. The Riceland folks, you could see they changed their skyline even with this this piece of storage back here and with these tanks that they just constructed. Our Nutrient Ag Solution folks, they've also expanded out there and hired more folks. And our Nutrient folks, they twinned their piece of their whole facility on the site. They twinned their plant and hired another 10 jobs. So all 3 of these tenants, we're very fortunate that we have them, and we appreciate that they continue to expand. The North Slackwater Harbor will allow us to become container capable, and it will allow us to have the additional land for leasing. This piece of property for the North Harbor will also give us much needed fleeting space. Next slide, please. Needs to be scooted over, I think. Sorry about that. Okay, there you go. Over the past 2 years, the port has invested over $5.6 million at the site through state and local funding. The next slide, please. And this is showing you a little bit of what we've done. This property had trees on it. We also were growing farmer. We had a farmer there farming the land for us. So the land has been purchased. The farmland has been taken out of rotation. Mitigation, we've met the mitigation. We've secured our permits. Historical preservation has been done. Next slide, please. This is just showing you here, if you can see the trees in the background. This is where the borrow pit was located. That's where we had to also mitigate for. We took out those trees, and that land is now level with the rest of the property. We also took out the ditches out there. Next slide, please. This is showing you where we've worked on the lift station. Let's see. This is the storm drainage, and we've also, those drainage pipes are on the concrete road that we expanded on that piece of property. You can go to the next slide, please. This is showing you that we took out the trees. We expanded some utilities out there, security lighting. Go to the next slide, please. We cleared and developed the property. And this has been done over a 3-4 year period. Next slide, please. You can see now that that piece of property has changed considerably. You can see the footprint of the harbor. And during the next few years, depending on the funding the port is able to acquire, port plans to finish construction of the harbor, place rail, side trackage, container crane. You can go to the next slide, please. Mooring dolphins, warehousing at the site. The utility lines that go across that piece of property on the west section of that property, they need to be raised so that we're able to put the rail spurs underneath that and the side trackage. And we've had to turn away folks in the past because we didn't have the amount of land they needed, or because our dock couldn't handle more than a 20-ton lift at one time. That dock was basically constructed back in the days to handle farm commodities. So it's been really sad when we've had to turn away coil steel and anything heavier than a 20-ton lift. We've also been approached by folks wanting to move containers, such as farm commodities, soybeans, cottonseed, irrigation pipe, and we didn't have the means to help those folks. We're located in an enhanced enterprise zone that allows incentives through the state and through New Madrid County. Being located in the St. Jude Industrial Park, the fees we pay into the park helps pay for the rail outside our gate. It pays for the roads outside our gate. It pays for the water sewer lines outside our gates. And it pays for 6 employees. We pay fees into the park along with Associated Electric, with Magnitude 7 Metals, and with Archer Daniels Midland. Now, our 3 tenants are considered port property tenants, so we do not pass that fee on to them. So anytime they want to bring someone in the park, it looks great in there, and everything is well taken care of. Those water treatment guys, I mean, they've called me before at midnight saying we had a problem out there. They watch everything for us, so we're very lucky to be in that area. And plus, being in the St. Jude Industrial Park too, it allows us to purchase more property. It would allow us to expand that harbor. It would allow us to have plenty of areas to hold containers, or if we needed to build more trackage. We have that available land out there. So we're very fortunate where we're located. In the past, we placed significant infrastructure out there on the South Harbor. We placed a rail spur with side trackage, truck scales, warehouses, mooring dolphins, the roads, security fencing, and that's part of the grant that we did with Cmo Port and Penobscot Port. We were able to, all 3 ports could get funds for security fencing and for security lighting, which allowed us to extend our electricity to the north side of that South Harbor. And we've also used we used the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act a few years ago to put down a concrete road and to help build the mooring dolphins. We've used Delta Regional Authority grants. We've used state SIP grants, community development block grants, any kind of grants that were available to us out there. And thank goodness that the SIP grant didn't call for us having to have jobs to be able to use those funds, because I would say at the port, when you say if you build it, they will come, that's pretty well been what's happened. And I think that's happened for every port that's been fortunate enough to get those funds in the state of Missouri. So we are very appreciative of the state funds through the SIP program. The Delta Regional Authority grant used to be the only grant that you could get without having to have jobs. Now you have to retain jobs or you have to place jobs. And it's also wonderful for all of us that there are more funds available through the state. We being in the Memphis district too, on our dredging end of it, we go to them every year and ask for dredge funds. Some, we've missed. Some we've been very fortunate to get. We were in the president's budget this next year, only we weren't budgeted for funds last year, so we had to beg for those. But, we talked about trying to figure out a way to dredge ourselves. The only thing is if we get out of the Memphis district rotation, we would have to go back to the Water Resource Development Act and ask to be put back in there. And I don't know if we would be able to be put back in there. So if our dredging gets changed, we need to be absolutely sure that a port doesn't have to all of a sudden not have funds, to dredge the harbor. So that is really important to us. We're also working on the language for this North Harbor right now to try to get into the Water Resource Development Act of 2020 in order to get dredging funds for that harbor. We do plan to go on and construct that harbor ourselves. We're doing that because of the Corps would have to do a study, which would add at least 3 years to the project. And, we don't feel like that we have that time to waste. We appreciate that they're there for us and they will help provide guidance for us. But we feel like that this project needs to be done. If we don't get the funds, yeah, it'll take us a lot of years. That's what's happened in the past. But I think we've done well, and I think you'll find any of the Missouri ports have done very well with any small amount of money they get. They make it go as far as possible. Next slide, please. If you'll see, there are pieces of infrastructure on this slide that shows you where we could possibly place these pieces of infrastructure. And our rail spur built into the slide, that's not really what we would call an ideal rail spur. We would really want to come off with a whole another spur for the north side of that harbor. We don't like constructing something where we could see there'd be a bottleneck problem later on. Only we know that, that may be what we have to do because of lack of funds. Hopefully we'll have a tenant that will be able to tell us where they need some of those pieces of infrastructure, but we plan to utilize that container crane by being able to move it up and down the wall of the harbor. So we would be able to conduct business anywhere out there. And I guess that's about all I've got. And I do want to thank Cheryl too for helping put all this together for me, because being here, it was really complicated for me to get all of it done.
Well, Tim and Lynn, thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions from panel members? I see Dustin online.
I've got a comment. So Timmy, Mary Lamy, great job with your presentation. And I just wanted to thank you for your forward thinking about the Container on Barge initiative. Obviously, we hear about all the congestion that's taking on the West Coast, and we know the inland waterway system is absolutely underutilized. And what you're trying to do absolutely is going to, I think, help freight movement, not only in the short future, but long term. So great job with all of that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Caitlin has a question. Caitlin?
Just more of a comment. I echo what Mary said. I really like the proactiveness that you guys are taking, and yeah, we would love to support as well any progressive actions for the state of Missouri.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I had just a couple weeks ago, had a great presentation of this whole project delivered to me by Representative Roan, who is really passionate about this and a huge supporter, and has done just a tremendous job for this region. Great service. We're going to miss him in Jefferson City, I can assure you, but I know everybody's glad to have him back full time. But he can see and express that the vision of container on vessel and the work to prepare for that. This is not a time to be tender-footed with the investments that need to be done, because they're happening all over the country, and we should participate in that so that we can take advantage of this movement. Once some of these development efforts get set, that's going to change the dimension of, just by virtue of having additional logistical capacity in certain areas, it's going to change the regions that do these things and make these investments. So these are real-time needed. It's been a promise for some time, but I think that promise is really, when you've got American Patriot Holdings has already put out the RFP to build the vessel,
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is literally, tripling the ability to move containers on the rivers in terms of speed, almost 13 knots at a very low draft, should the promise of this vessel be fulfilled, and it does look very promising. So this type of forward thinking by the port, by Representative Roan, could really help continue the progress that this region has made. So congratulations to you on the work, putting all the work together for the project. I'm hoping we can get some attention on this in Jefferson City before the session is out, and hopefully can make some of these investments a reality. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Any further questions for Timmy Lynn? We'll let you get back to, I know you're busy there as well, but perfect timing of the report. I also wanted to take an opportunity, it's not on the agenda, but we did have the good fortune, I saw our Commissioner Dustin Boatwright has joined us, and I'd like to give him the floor for a couple minutes if he'd like to address the task force. It's great to have you here, Commissioner, and thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. May have to pick this up because I'm a little bit taller. No, thank you. Thank you for having me and inviting me, and appreciate the opportunity to get to listen. I was listening to the live feed as I was driving this way earlier, and I hated to be late, but we had an event that the governor was at down at Gobbler, Missouri, for the tornado that hit a few months ago. It was a recognition event to the first responders and folks that were impacted from that tornado. Just want to thank the task force and the presenters. This info, being able to put together a group of professionals to listen to industry talk about the things that they're seeing that you guys are seeing on the ground every day, and how we can figure out solutions to those problems. It's a big deal. I love this open forum, and I love if you start talking about this area, thinking big is what I was going to get at. I love thinking big because this area, a lot of folks don't know the history of this area. We're at the head of the Delta. So we're at the top end, or we're at the top end of the Mississippi embayment, at the edge of the Ozark Escarpment, which is Cape Girardeau. So you're in the Delta. From this point down to the Gulf of Mexico, we have 340, 330 feet of elevation change to the mean sea level. So this area, it's a little bit different than the rest of the state. You go back to when Missouri became a state in 1821, this area was a swamp, not productive for the state. You fast forward to today, because of a big vision of a group of people that saw the potential for productivity, this area in any given year, 30% of our agriculture commodities are coming out of these 9 counties that are in the Delta. That's huge. And we're talking about an area that takes up 5% of the land mass in Missouri. So thinking big is something that the folks, certainly in this part of the state, have had to do just to get to the point that we are today of it being as productive as it is. And it's just going to continue to get more productive. I mean, just during my lifetime, I've seen farm yields continue to go up. World food needs is something that Senator Blunt touches on quite often. The amount of commodities that we're going to handle at these port authorities are going to continue to increase. They're not going back the other way. The technology and the funding that's going into making our farms more productive, it's not going away. So the demand, the impact on our infrastructure is going to, of course, be impacted by that continued demand for farm commodities and for continued growth. As was pointed out earlier, the strategic location that we have, and Senator Blunt does a really good job of talking about Missouri being the nexus of transportation for the entire country. I mean, you look at where we're situated, we have the Mississippi River to our east, we have the Missouri that runs across the middle of the state, we have the dam system that comes in to the north, we have the confluence of the Ohio River coming in from the east, we have I-70, I-55. I mean, just go through the list of the major interstates that we have in the state. We have great opportunity here to, just from our geographic location, benefit and prosper because of. So I think groups like this, as far as thinking big and moving forward and tackling some of these supply chain issues that we have, just from a country board from Southeast Missouri standpoint, we can't continue to depend on the East and West Coast for our goods. We just can't do it. And this, with COVID, I think we got to a critical point that a lot of things came to a head and showed themselves, and now we need to find a solution to it. So thank you in this group for looking for those solutions. As Ms. Lamy said a few minutes ago, the inland waterway system is very, very underutilized. We have great opportunities on that waterway system, and we haven't scratched the surface with that yet, with those opportunities. One thing that I wanted to leave the group with, and I was a part of an agriculture leadership group in 2015-16, and we went to Vietnam in 2016. In July of 2016, we went to Vietnam. And going into it, I thought I was going into a third world country, which it was. When I got on the ground there, the amount of funding and money that had been put into roads and bridges, and that was the first time I saw a container and vessel on barge, and the amount of infrastructure that they had on the ground for container on barge and vessel at that time was overwhelming to me. That was in 2016. They already had the infrastructure in place to be able to handle this. So we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on this, but I'm super excited to see this group working towards finding those solutions to our supply chain issues. So thank each and every one of you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. I'll leave it at that.
Great. It's an opportunity for me to grill a commissioner when it's usually on the other side, but they're usually pretty nice to me, so I'll do the same. You can see it's great to have Mr. Boatwright on our commission. He brings a lot of passion and energy to this and expertise. So it's advancing MoDOT, it's advancing Missouri, and that's the whole point. We're here to get things done. And despite the resource limitations, there's always things that can be done to move things forward, and we continue to do that. So thanks for being here today. I did want to note that our next meeting is in Kansas City. It's on April 7th, so we're going to have a good meeting there as well. And I also wanted to have an opportunity for any public comment. If anybody's here that'd like to make some comment. Hearing none. Anybody online? Okay. I did want to just recognize Mr. Ross. Mr. John Ross is here in the audience, and I know running for John, running for state representative. So good luck to you, sir. It's always great to have people that join the public fray, and hopefully keep it just the fray, not the fracas, right? So it's really important to have people step up and to serve, and that's an important part of everything we do. And so, thank you for your participation here and for being here today, and good wishes to you for your work going forward. Wanted to open it up for any members of the task force. Any closing comments? Oh.
Director McKenna, I would just say thank you to, excuse me, I hope I didn't jump in front of somebody there.
I think we're just going to recognize Mr. Donnie Brown as well, who's here and also looking to throw the hat in the ring as well. So terrific. Just having people that want to understand, the issues, bring those to the public domain, really important. So I'll turn it back over to you, Dustin. Thank you.
Yeah, I apologize for that. No, I just wanted to say thank you to all of the presenters this afternoon, as well as the technical team that helps set this up for every session. I know they put a lot and invest a lot in addition to to your team and staff as well. And thank you to you and Dr. Leathers for your chairmanship and leadership as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. Appreciate your participation and expertise. Mary, any comments?
Just one last comment, and it just really focuses on some of the great comments we heard from the two ports today. And that is the emphasis was on infrastructure and what the market really is right now and those opportunities for them to attract new tenants. But the other thing we didn't talk about, which I think is really important from a jobs perspective, is when we start seeing more soybeans and corn or rice go to these ports, then the next part is what's really transformational, and that is, are there opportunities for those soybeans then to be crushed at that location, which would then be another job creator? Are there opportunities for rice to be consolidated at that location? Can it be milled? Can it be packaged here rather than in other countries? And same thing with corn. Can we start consolidating that corn at these ports, then put them in a container, and just look at the economics that all of a sudden they're already in a container when they go to the Gulf of Mexico and then put on one of the big ships. So we talked a lot about the infrastructure, but the added value that can come to some of these locations when we're really driving those transportation costs down. So some really great opportunities in this part of the state.
You know, that's a great point. And you know, when you combine that with the potential for container on vessel, you know, that also brings the opportunity for refrigerated containers. So then you really are looking at advanced value add products.
And that would be a big win for anywhere in this state because we have a deficit when it comes to that. And when we look at the ports in southern Louisiana, tremendous opportunities when it comes to the refrigerated cargo.
Great points. Caitlin, any final comments?
Just to thank you again to all the presenters today. I think we had a really good mix of cargo owners, port owners, developers, and you know, it gave a really clear, transparent picture of some things that are needed that I'm sure we're going to be discussing to add into the report. And I agree with Mary. I think, you know, it's really important too to not just look at the next step, but the 2 to 3 steps after that of what's going to be needed from an infrastructure side. Just, you know, as a freight forwarder, we transload a lot of cargo that goes all around the Midwest. I actually would love to see the opportunities of freight that's not destined to deliver or pick up in Missouri actually transload at Missouri ports and then go on rail or go on truck to surrounding states. So there's a lot of opportunity to be had in and outside of Missouri.
Well, great. We lost a little bit at the end there, Caitlin, but that's a good point. You know, having the ability to have transloading activities that occur, even if it's not origination or destination here in Missouri, we can take advantage of the strategic location of Missouri, as Commissioner Boatwright also mentioned. So really great points. Excellent meeting. Thanks again to the presenters. And again, we're pretty excited. We also have, just as a plug here, we have the Lieutenant Governor is going to be here in just about an hour to recognize a lot of the first responders and the coordination of the events on I-57 from last week. So we do appreciate that. And thanks to my team and everybody here in the Southeast District. Mark, thanks to your team and everybody. Well, we're all one team, right? So, you know, again, you know, you get a call a couple days ago and say, hey, can you set up an additional meeting for us? And your team here and the way that you work together is outstanding, and really do appreciate it. So with that, we'll adjourn until April 7th. I want to thank everybody for being here. Please be safe on your way home. Take care.